In 2023, the Federal Trade Commission sued a company called Key Investment Group for scalping tickets. And when you see the numbers, you'll understand why. This company spent roughly $57 million buying tickets to concerts, sports events, anything that would sell out. They resold those tickets for about $64 million. That's $7 million in gross profit. Sounds like a fantastic business. Now do the math. 7 million on 57 million in capital is about a 12% margin before you pay the people who run the operation. Before you pay for the thousands of fake Ticketmaster accounts you created to buy the tickets in the first place. Before you pay for the proxy servers and the burner SIM cards you use to hide those accounts. Before you pay for the lawyers you're going to need when the federal government comes after you, which it did. The FTC's complaint says Key Investment Group bought around 2,280 Taylor Swift Eras Tour tickets alone, spending about $745,000 and reselling them for just under $2 million. That's their best case. Their highlight reel. And even that, once you subtract the infrastructure that made it possible, starts to look a lot less like a gold mine and a lot more like a thin margin inventory business that just got you dragged into federal court. So here's the question nobody asks. If this is what the top of the scalping game looks like, a 12% gross margin and a federal lawsuit, then where is the real money in scalping? Because somebody is getting rich off of this system. Somebody is making reliable, repeatable profit every time a concert sells out or a sneaker drops or a new console launches. But it might not be who you think. Scalping is a middleman business. You buy something at one price, you sell it at a higher price, and you try to keep the difference. That's it. That's the entire model. A scalper is doing what every wholesaler, every distributor, and every reseller on the planet does. The only difference is what they're selling, and the fact that what they're selling has an expiration date. Think about it like this. A guy buys a concert ticket for $200. He lists it on StubHub for $500. Someone who really wants to go to that show pays the $500. The scalper pockets the difference. That's the version of this business that everyone pictures, and that's true as far as it goes. Because the moment you treat scalping as a real business instead of a one-off hustle, the picture gets a lot more complicated. There are actually 3 different scalping markets, and each one runs on the same basic logic but with very different economics. The first and oldest is ticket scalping. Concerts, sporting events, Broadway shows, anything with a fixed number of seats and more demand than supply. This used to be the guy standing outside the arena with a handful of tickets and a loud voice. Now it's an organized digital operation, and the numbers have gotten enormous. The secondary ticket market, meaning every ticket sold after the original purchase, is estimated at around $15 billion globally. That's not a side hustle. That's bigger than some entire entertainment companies. The second market is sneakers and streetwear. Brands like Nike, Jordan, and Yeezy deliberately produce less product than there is demand. They announce a release date, they drop a limited number of pairs, and within minutes, the retail stock is gone. Whatever didn't sell through the official store starts showing up on resale platforms at a markup. The sneaker resale market was valued at about $8.5 billion in 2024, and projections have it growing to $30 billion by 2030. There are entire companies, publicly valued in the billions, built for nothing but sneaker resale. The third market is electronics, specifically launch window electronics. Consoles, graphics cards, anything where a manufacturer launches a product and the supply chain can't keep up with demand for the first few months. The PlayStation 5 launch in 2020 is the textbook case. The console retailed for $500. In the first several months, resale prices regularly hit $800 to $1,000, sometimes higher. People who managed to get one at retail could flip it the same day for a $300 to $500 profit without leaving their house. That's the kind of margin that attracts a lot of attention in a hurry. Now, in every single one of these markets, the scalper is doing the same thing. Buying at a controlled price, which is whatever the box office or the retailer or the manufacturer set, and selling at the market price, which is whatever someone is actually willing to pay. The spread between those two numbers is where the money lives. And the bigger the gap between supply and demand, the bigger that spread gets. But here's the part that makes this business fundamentally different from regular retail arbitrage. Your inventory has an expiration date. A concert ticket is worth something right up until the show starts. After that, it's worth nothing. Not less. Nothing. You can't return it. You can't use it. You can't sell it for parts. If you bought a $200 ticket hoping to sell it for $500 and you didn't find a buyer before the lights go down, you just lost $200. A limited sneaker holds its value for a window, sometimes weeks, sometimes months. But hype fades, restocks happen, and when a pair that was selling for $400 over retail suddenly drops back to retail or below, you're not sitting on an investment anymore. You're sitting on a shoe. A PlayStation 5 is worth a premium exactly as long as nobody else can find one in a store. The moment Sony catches up on production and units start sitting on shelves, the secondary market collapses. And it did. So the scalper is a middleman on a timer. Buy the inventory, move the inventory, and get out before the clock runs down. Miss that window, and the margins don't just shrink, they disappear entirely. And sometimes, when you're sitting on inventory that nobody wants anymore, they go negative. That's the basic model, and honestly, if you're watching this, you probably already knew most of it. You buy low, you sell high, you keep the spread. Simple. But the version you've heard? That's not the full picture. Because the guy who bought that ticket for $200 and sold it for $500 didn't just walk up to the box office and get lucky. He paid for the tools to get there. And those tools are an industry of their own. If this is already making sense, and you want to see how the machine behind it actually works, hit subscribe. If you picture a scalper, you probably picture a person. Someone sitting at a computer, refreshing a page, trying to get lucky. That image is about 10 years out of date. Modern scalping is a technology stack, and the person at the top of it is more like a small business operator running software than a bargain hunter getting clever. The first layer of that stack is the bot. A scalper bot is a piece of software that sits on a retailer's website, constantly refreshing the product page, and the moment the item goes live, it adds the item to the cart and completes the checkout process automatically. We're talking about software that can go from product available to order confirmed in less than a second. A human being can't even read the add to cart button in that time, let alone click it. That's why when a big sneaker drops or a concert goes on sale and the inventory vanishes in seconds, the answer is almost always bots. Hundreds of them running at the same time, each one completing checkouts faster than your browser could even load the page. And these bots are not free. You don't build one yourself, at least not usually. You buy access to one, or more accurately, you rent it. Bot as a service is a real business model. Developers build and maintain the software, and you pay somewhere between $50 and $200 a month for a subscription. That gets you the bot, regular updates when retailers change their checkout systems, and usually some kind of customer support. There's even a secondary market for popular bot subscriptions, because the ones that actually work are in high demand. But the bot alone isn't enough. You also need intelligence, meaning you need to know what's dropping, when it's dropping, which retailer is going to have stock, and what the resale price is likely to be. That's where cook groups come in. A cook group is a paid membership community, almost always run on Discord, where members share insider information about upcoming releases. For somewhere between $20 and $100 a month, you get access to stock alerts, resale price estimates, bot configuration settings tuned to specific retailers, and tools that help you get around purchase limits. Some of these groups have tools that automatically monitor retailer websites around the clock and ping you the second anything restocks. Others offer address jigging tools that let you place multiple orders to the same house by slightly altering your shipping address each time so the retailer doesn't flag you as the same buyer. Others run collective buys, where the group negotiates discounted rates on bot subscriptions and proxy access for all its members. And speaking of proxies, that's the third piece of the stack. When you're running a bot that sends dozens or hundreds of checkout requests to the same website in a few seconds, that website is going to notice. It's going to see a burst of traffic from one IP address and block it. So you route your bot's traffic through residential proxies, services that let each of your requests come from a different IP address. So the retailer thinks they're all different people, shopping from different homes in different cities. That's an additional cost, on top of the bot subscription and the cook group membership. Add it all up, and the startup cost for 1 month of serious scalping, not counting the money you spend on actual inventory, is around $300. And that's the low end. Serious operators spend more. The company that got sued by the FTC, Key Investment Group, wasn't running a couple of bots and a Discord group. They were running thousands of fake Ticketmaster accounts. They were using proxy servers at scale. They were buying burner SIM cards to verify those accounts. Their monthly operating costs would have dwarfed what a solo scalper spends in a year. What comes next is the part that still doesn't make sense. Because once you've paid for all of this infrastructure and actually secured the inventory, you'd think the hard part is over. You'd think the rest is just listing it and collecting your money. It isn't. Let's run the actual math on a ticket flip, because almost nobody does this. And the moment you do, the business looks completely different. You buy a ticket for $200. You list it on StubHub for $500. Someone buys it. StubHub takes a 15% commission from you, the seller. That's $75 off the top. So your gross on that sale is $425 minus the $200 you paid for the ticket. That's $225 in your pocket. Sounds decent, right? Except you haven't subtracted the $50 to $200 a month you're paying for bot software. You haven't subtracted the Cook Group membership. You haven't subtracted the proxy costs. And if you're doing this at any kind of volume, you haven't subtracted the time, the risk, or the tickets you bought and couldn't sell. And that's just your side. On the other end of the transaction, the buyer is paying even more. StubHub adds an average of about 28% in fees on top of the listed price. So the person who sees your $500 listing is actually paying closer to $640. Total fees across both sides of a StubHub transaction average 27%. On Vivid Seats, it's over 31%. That's the kind of number that makes accountants cry. Nearly a third of every dollar that moves through the secondary ticket market goes straight to the platform. The sneaker market works the same way, just with different platforms taking the cut. StockX and GOAT are the two biggest sneaker resale marketplaces, and between them and eBay, online platforms capture over 65% of total sneaker resale transaction value. StockX alone is projected at around $540 million in revenue. Their valuation sits at $3.8 billion. GOAT is valued at $3.7 billion. These are billion-dollar companies built entirely on facilitating the same transactions scalpers are running. Now here's where the math gets really interesting, or really depressing, depending on which side of it you're on. The headline stories about scalping always feature the outliers. Eras tour tickets that resold for $23,000 in Las Vegas, or $45,000 in Philadelphia. Those numbers are real. Those transactions happened. But those are the lottery winners. The vast majority of scalpers are not flipping $45,000 tickets. They're grinding out $50 to $150 margins per unit, one transaction at a time, and hoping the volume adds up. And volume is not guaranteed, because inventory risk is real, and it cuts both directions. Remember the PlayStation 5? In 2020, you couldn't find one in a store, and resale prices were through the roof. Scalpers were cleaning up. Fast forward to the PlayStation 5 Pro launch in late 2024, and the story completely reversed. The console was in stock at basically every major retailer. Scalpers who bought units expecting a shortage tried to list them above retail and couldn't find buyers. In Japan, resellers on Mercari were barely breaking even after the platform took its cut, and they paid for shipping. Some of them lost money outright. That's the expiration date at work. The timer ran out, supply caught up, and every unit still sitting in a scalper's closet went from an asset to a liability overnight. Nobody writes a headline about the scalper who bought 10 PS5 Pros and quietly ate the loss, but that story is far more common than the one about the guy who flipped an Eras Tour ticket for $45,000. So when you add it all up, the cost of the tools, the platform fees on both sides, the inventory that sometimes doesn't sell, and the margin compression that happens the moment supply catches up, scalping starts to look a lot less like easy money and a lot more like any other thin margin business, where the upside is capped and the downside is real. So if scalping is a thin margin business with real operating costs and real inventory risk, you'd think somebody would have shut it down by now. Why is it everywhere? Why hasn't anyone stopped it? In 2016, Congress passed a law called the BOTS Act. It stands for Better Online Ticket Sales, and it makes it explicitly illegal to use automated software to bypass ticket purchase limits, create fake accounts, or circumvent security controls to buy tickets in bulk. The law was designed to do exactly what the name suggests: stop bots from buying up all the tickets before real people can get to them. As of 2025, that law had been used to prosecute exactly one case. If you're wondering how that's even legal, so is everyone else. Congress passed the law. The president signed it. The FTC was supposed to enforce it. And then, for the better part of a decade, almost nothing happened. Senators publicly criticized the FTC for failing to act. Letters were sent, hearings were held. The law sat on the books while bots got faster, cook groups got more organized, and the secondary ticket market kept growing. The FTC's first major enforcement action under the Bots Act was the Key Investment Group lawsuit from earlier. That case is still working its way through federal court. But one lawsuit in nearly 10 years of a law being on the books is not what you'd call aggressive enforcement. Meanwhile, the problem didn't hold still. Ticketmaster says it now blocks 200 million bot attempts per day. Not per year, per day. That's a five-fold increase from 2019. The arms race between the platforms trying to stop bots and the bot developers trying to get past them is a full-time industry on both sides. And the bot developers are winning often enough to keep the whole ecosystem profitable. So why does scalping persist if it's not even that profitable for the scalpers themselves? The answer is in how the market is structured. And it starts with something economists have studied for decades: the price gap. Here's how it works. When Taylor Swift announces a tour, or Nike announces a sneaker drop, or Sony announces a console launch, the company sets a price. That price is almost always below what the market would actually pay. Economists call this underpricing, and research going back to at least 2003 has studied why it happens. Venues and brands underprice for a handful of reasons. They want the sellout because a sold-out show generates more buzz than a half-empty one. They want the perception of fairness because a face value price that feels accessible builds goodwill with their audience. And they want the demand signal because a line around the block and a sold-out banner are marketing that money can't buy. But that underpricing creates a gap. The face value ticket costs $200. The market clearing price, what someone is actually willing to pay, might be $800. That $600 gap is not an accident. It's a structural feature of how live events and limited releases are priced. The scalper moves into a gap the venue already created. A 2024 study published in Science Direct specifically examined how underpricing creates perceived scarcity, and how that perception shifts demand upward. The excess demand situation created by the low face value doesn't just attract scalpers. It makes the product feel more valuable to everyone. The sellout is the point. The scarcity is the strategy. And the resale market is the predictable byproduct of a pricing decision that was made upstream before the scalper ever entered the picture. That reframes the entire conversation. The scalper isn't breaking the system. The scalper is the system working exactly as the economics predict it will when you price a product below its market value. The only question is who captures the difference, and how much of that difference ends up in whose pocket. But this stopped being just a scalper story. Because while everyone focused on who was buying and reselling tickets, nobody was looking at who was actually getting hurt. Start with the fans, because that's where the damage is most visible and most personal. When Taylor Swift announced the Eras Tour, Ticketmaster rolled out its verified fan system. The idea was straightforward. Fans register in advance, Ticketmaster screens out the bots, and real people get access to the presale. Millions of fans signed up. And then the presale went live, and Ticketmaster's systems collapsed. Outages, delays, queues that lasted hours. People who waited all morning reached the front of the line only to find out there was nothing left. The general public sale was canceled entirely because there weren't enough tickets remaining to justify opening it. And on the secondary market, the tickets that did exist were listed at prices that had no relationship to the face value. $23,000 for a show in Las Vegas. $45,000 for Philadelphia. Taylor Swift herself said it really pisses me off that fans had to go through what she described as several bear attacks just to get a ticket. But here's the part that stings. The artist gets blamed for prices she didn't set. Swift didn't price those resale tickets. Ticketmaster didn't technically price them either, at least not the third-party resale listings. The market did. But the fan standing outside the venue, the one who couldn't afford a ticket because the only ones available were $5,000, doesn't care about the distinction between primary pricing and secondary market dynamics. To that fan, the system failed, and someone with money got in while they didn't. The damage went beyond music. When scalpers bought PlayStation 5 consoles in bulk during the 2020 launch, the impact was bigger than inflated prices for gamers. Every console sitting in a scalper's closet was a console that wasn't in someone's living room buying games. The game library existed. The demand existed. But the players didn't have the hardware yet, because thousands of units were trapped in a resale pipeline instead of living rooms. And then there are the scalpers themselves. The image of the scalper as a ruthless profiteer making thousands on every transaction is mostly fiction. Look at any resale platform for consoles and you'll find that a huge chunk of the sellers moved 1 or 2 units total. These weren't professional scalpers. They were people who got lucky on a drop and figured they could make a quick buck. The picture of scalping as a coordinated criminal enterprise run by masterminds doesn't hold up. It's mostly amateurs, most of them barely clearing their costs, some of them losing money, and a small number at the top doing real volume with real infrastructure. The PS5 Pro launch in 2024 was the clearest example. Scalpers loaded up expecting another shortage, and every retailer had stock. The resale listings sat untouched. The scalpers, who expected a repeat of the original PS5, were the ones eating losses. So, if the scalpers aren't making as much as you think, and the fans are paying more than they should, and the artists are getting blamed for prices they didn't set, then where is all the money actually going? If you're still here, subscribe, because this next part is the reason I made this video. The biggest scalper in the system isn't the guy running a bot from his apartment, it's the platform. Take Ticketmaster. Ticketmaster sells you the ticket on the primary market. That's the original sale, face value, the one you wait in line for. Ticketmaster charges fees on that transaction, but Ticketmaster also runs its own resale marketplace. It's called TM Plus, and it's built directly into the same platform where you buy the original ticket. So when someone buys a ticket through Ticketmaster and then resells it through Ticketmaster's own resale marketplace, Ticketmaster collects fees twice. Once on the way in and once on the way out. The primary sale and the resale both generate revenue for the same company. And according to internal documents, the company probably wishes had never been made public. Ticketmaster had been engineering the resale market from the start. In March 2026, the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations released a report that reviewed more than 110,000 pages of internal Ticketmaster documents. And what those documents showed was a company that had been actively pushing artists and venues toward earlier resale activation, more aggressive dynamic pricing, and revenue-maximizing on-sale tactics, while publicly blaming bad actors for the same high prices it was helping to create. The report found internal Ticketmaster material showing the company tracking the time between a primary ticket sale and the activation of its TM Plus resale product, then pushing to shorten that window from days to minutes. Think about what that means. Ticketmaster was measuring how quickly tickets could move from the primary market to the resale market on its own platform, and then working to make that happen faster, not to stop scalping, to accelerate it because every resale transaction generated more fee revenue. Post-2017 venue contracts locked in higher resale fees, effectively making the resale marketplace a growth engine for the company. Ticketmaster was building a business on top of the secondary market, while telling Congress and the public that bots and bad actors were the problem. And no, I'm not making that up. It's in the Senate report. The report is titled "So Casually Cruel," and you can read it yourself. Now look at the sneaker side of this. StockX is valued at $3.8 billion. GOAT is valued at $3.7 billion. These are platforms that do nothing but facilitate resale. They don't make sneakers. They don't design them. They don't manufacture them. They built billion-dollar companies by standing between the buyer and the seller, authenticating the product and taking a cut. The individual reseller grinds out $50 margins on a pair of Jordans with real risk and a ticking clock. Meanwhile, the platform collects a fee on every sale with no inventory, no time pressure, and no risk at all. That's the pattern, and it repeats across every scalping market. The individual scalper takes the risk. The individual scalper takes the public blame. And when a story about scalping makes the news, it's always the scalper's face on the headline. Not the platform. Not the venue that underpriced the ticket. Not the brand that manufactured scarcity on purpose. The scalper. Meanwhile, the platform takes its fee on every single transaction. Win or lose, legal or illegal, and it takes it from both sides. The platform takes it whether the scalper wins or loses, whether the ticket sells for $5,000 or the PS5 Pro sits unsold. The platform always gets paid. So go back to where we started. The FTC sued Key Investment Group for spending $57 million on tickets and reselling them for $64 million. That company is now in federal court. The public story is that a scalper got caught. And that's true. But Ticketmaster made fees on every single one of those transactions. The primary sale, the resale. Every dollar in, every dollar out. the platform took its cut. And this isn't just a ticketing story. It's sneakers, it's consoles. It's every market where a platform positions itself between a controlled supply and real demand, takes a fee on both sides of the transaction, and lets the individual resellers absorb the risk and the blame. The scalper is the visible one. The scalper is the one who gets the angry tweet, the news segment, the federal lawsuit. But the platform is the business model. It was a business model before the Bots Act, and it will be a business model after the next law Congress passes, because the law targets the scalper and the profits sit with the platform. And until those incentives change, the system will keep producing exactly what it's designed to produce. Tell me in the comments which industry you think does this the most. And if you want to see how the next one actually works, subscribe. I'll see you in that one.